Hey, this is Dr. Drew, and you were listening to This Life
with Bob Forrest
and Dr. Drew.
Here we are.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gather around. It's time for the next podcast of This Life with Dr. Drew.
Bob, you've changed your voice.
And
what happened?
guess
Are you
what?
transitioning?
I might be, but no.
No, you're not planning to.
Shelly Sprague here.
Shelly Sprague is here sitting in for Bob, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you so
Bob.
much.
Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Good.
I'm
So
happy to be here.
Bob has handed off to you for a little while. So everything good with you?
Yes, everything is great. Everything is so exciting. We're just, working so hard and trying to, get all these new things going up and running and helping people, recover from addiction and other things,
Yeah.
Obviously, we have a lot of dual diagnosis stuff and people who are, struggling. So
It's really hard.
It is very, very hard, but, we just keep it up every day,
Good.
We change one person's life, we change thousands of people's lives.
It carries you to the next day, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
So today we're going to sort of focus on, in a way, post-traumatic stress disorder. This is in the heels, of course, of the shooting outside of Denver, that school shooting. Did that affect you at all?
Yes, these affect me deeply.
Yeah, I figured.
They affect me deeply because obviously I have a child who is in high school, which always brings it back to thinking about how our society and how culturally this has happened and continues to happen and what we're doing about it.
Do you feel like I do that at least a chunk of this is untreated mental health issues or mental health issues that were I don't want to say improperly managed, that just weren't fully managed? Families in denial, that kind of stuff.
I believe that it's a cultural phenomenon at this point.
Yeah.
But it's
at risk to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think that it is mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, what else? I mean, unless we've moved into another cultural era where mass murder has now become the norm,
Yeah.
I am not aware of that.
Nor am I aware that it's normative behavior. In other words, people.
I can't
think of
imagine that it
the
is.
kid down in Florida was severely ill, got away from his treatment team because his mother died. No way to force him back because he's an adult.
Because he's an adult.
He unravels. This kid in Denver, or near Columbine, this kid, mental health issues all the way through, seemingly completely untreated. It seems like
I do risk assessments for the greater part of my day.
Yeah.
And my risk assessments include questions about, are you being bullied? Have you been bullied? Are you suffering from any mental health issues? Do you feel depressed? Are you anxious? Are you agitated? These are the things I do all day long. And I see people who would benefit from a psychiatric team and an inpatient level of care.
But they won't do it.
But they're not willing to do it. However, I do send them anyway.
Yeah.
I send them to UCLA.
But
if I feel like they're high risk.
I hope so, and I hope
send
the
them
fact that they
into-
get in, I think is fantastic. But the biggest problem is because gravely disabled is such a narrow thing, they don't go in. They just go, screw you. I'm angry with you too.
Actually, I've been able to get people in by sending them with a note saying, this is what the client's presenting with. I would really appreciate an assessment. I do think this person needs to be treated at a higher level of care, that outpatient isn't the appropriate level of care for this person at this time.
Are there enough beds?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't tell the staff that I'll take them if they don't take them, then they take them.
Got it.
And they stabilize them. But of course they unravel quickly. I've noticed that folks who have significant mental illness, what they do is they have about a 2-week to 3-week cycle where they decompensate, and then they come into care, then they reattune and then get back on their regimen, and then they're better, and then they decompensate. There's a high level of decompensation that I think that's where the missing piece is.
Because they don't take their meds?
They don't take their meds, and they're not being monitored properly.
No follow-up. Let's bring in our first guest, Chad Robichaux. He is a former Force Recon Marine, pro MMA champion, founder of Mighty Oaks Foundation. Mighty Oaks is a peer-to-peer healing organization for veterans suffering with PTSD. You can go to mightyoaksprograms.org. Chad, welcome to the program, our program.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Welcome, Chad.
And Chad had a crazy story. Maybe you want to just tell your story and talk to us about Mighty Oaks.
Yeah, well, Mighty Oaks really started with as a pay it forward effort when I came home from Afghanistan, and if I could go back a little further, my father was a Marine as well. My son Hunter is a Marine, so 3 generations of Marines in my family. My son's deployed to Afghanistan right now, being the 3rd combat vet in my family. But my father came home and struggled with a lot of things I think many warriors struggle with today. Likely post-traumatic stress, although I don't think he was ever diagnosed. But I grew up in a very dysfunctional home as a result of that. And joined the Marine Corps at 17 years old with definitely some childhood issues that were unresolved. From physical abuse. I had a brother a year older than me who was shot and killed as a teenager. So I went into the Marine Corps really looking for a clean slate at life, and made it to be a Force Reconnaissance Marine. I made it onto a Joint Special Operations Command Task Force, which is kind of like the pinnacle of in special operations. And so very privileged for the opportunity. And I got to do 8 deployments in that capacity over a pretty rapid period of time.
Wow.
And during those years of deployments, I started initially dealing with just a very intense personality, very angry, driven. It worked really well in Afghanistan because I worked in a very small special operations community, and that anger and intensity, it helped us. I believe it helped us do our job very well. However, that wasn't switch you could flip and come back home and be a husband and father, and you're just typical average civilian. And so coming home, it was a complete disconnect. That anger would make it into my home, and it was very my family really suffered with me being just a tyrant in my home.
But you're shining a light on not just PTSD, but that transition to civilian life is poorly attended to by the military, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's you have to think like I'm in Afghanistan one day under constant, doing operations that my team members' lives that are very high risk and doing things that are pretty insane. And then 24 hours later, I'm back home, walking, and my wife's cooking dinner and my kids are running around doing their normal thing. And there's just really no reacclimation.
Yeah.
Right.
And, for me, that person, and I can give you many examples, like my home, it's a shame for me to say, but my home was not a safe place for my family. Like my wife and children were scared of me. I always share this story really just to give a picture of what my life was like at that time. My daughter was having a birthday party. I came home from Afghanistan. She was so excited because I was going to be back for her birthday. And she's just said that one little thing, because she's very opinionated, and that's just who she is. But she didn't like the icing on her cake, and grabbed a handful of my little girl's birthday cake and threw her cake against the wall, destroyed my little girl's birthday. And that was just how I behaved at that time. And so my reaction, instead of addressing those things, were just to distance myself, really to protect them. And so being deployed was much easier than being home and having to integrate with my family.
Sheesh.
Right.
Your
Yeah,
question,
that's
Shelly?
difficult. Yeah, my question was, do they have any programs when you do come back? Is there any kind of debriefing available for you guys?
Well, all the branches are different. All the commands are different. For me at that time, there was nothing like that. Now I participate in a lot of programs. Okay. We offer as a foundation lots of programs to help people reintegrate. Right. I think the Air Force probably does it the best out of all the branches I've seen for their through the Yellow Ribbon program. Okay. However, there's still not a very big transition piece, and people still suffer just like I did. Yeah. The reason I brought this up related to PTSD, because for me, this was a gradual transition from anger and frustration to anxiety in different levels of just being unchecked, untreated, that resulted in me having physiological symptoms of panic attacks. It started with my arms would go numb, my face would go numb. I'd feel like my throat was swelling shut and I couldn't breathe. I mean, I didn't know at the time.
You were such a charged autonomic state. I mean, your body was in this
the fight or flight.
constant state of arousal. Of course, it flips into panic once in a while.
Yeah. For me, my particular job, I wouldn't go back on a base. So I lived in the Afghan community in the homes and ate dinner with their families and played soccer with their kids. And I was 24/7 in this state, and many of the guys I worked with were there too. And so when this started happening to me, I didn't want to say anything because I felt like the guys who I worked with would think I was weak and I'd be pulled out of my job. So my initial reaction was just to try to hide it, push it down, and push through, which most people in that career field would do, and most people in the military try to do.
I think a lot of guys and gals also go into security or law enforcement to kind of keep that whole thing going. Do you think so, Chad?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's I mean, you mean military guys transitioning into law enforcement?
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you trying to stay in something you're familiar with, and high stress jobs feels right. If you could keep pushing and stay in that state, it feels more comfortable
with the central nervous system being so activated. It's almost like you're almost like not having to deal with feelings when you're in these heightened states.
Well, you're the only feeling you need to worry about is arousal.
And then when you come back down, you kind of crash. And then also
when you come down, you can sort of maybe get a flood of whatever else you've been experiencing.
Of course. And then that unconscious kind of unlocks, and then you have all that flooding coming in. It's difficult, very difficult.
And that was definitely the case with me. For me, it progressed to a point to where I started forgetting things. I almost had like these out-of-body experiences, which I just can't even really explain to put into words.
Yeah.
My body almost felt like absent from my physical presence.
Right. So that's called dissociation. That's even a more primitive mechanism. That's something we share with reptiles. It's the freeze response. And in total shutdown, freeze, your brain turns off. So literally you are out of body.
That's how I felt like while operating in Afghanistan. And there was a moment that I woke up almost like out of a fog for about a 2-week period. And I recognized that I was putting not only myself in danger, but other people. So I spoke up, said something. I was brought home. I was put before a clinical psychologist and diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Sure.
Okay.
And that actually began the darkest part at that point. Because for me at that time, the only way I've been able to kind of put into words how I felt, like the imminent state of panic I was in at that moment, was like if I was handcuffed to the bottom of a swimming pool and could see the air and like trying to get a breath of air, and you just never drown. You never die. That's how I felt, like 24/7. And I was terrified to tell people how I felt, even my psychologist. Right. And on top of that, I felt completely ashamed because I was doing what I believe to be a very important job and had a tremendous amount of responsibility, and I failed at it. And so I'm dealing with the feeling my body's going to physically die. I'm feeling ashamed. And my wife and my counselor are trying to find something for me to do. And this is where the MMA came in, because martial arts is something I had done since I was 5 years old. I was already a professional fighter. And so, Dr. Drew, when you talk about that transition, for me, instead of anything else, for me, it was if I could get into something that would keep me, making me feel masculine again, feel purposeful again, it would help. And honestly, I love jiu-jitsu. I've done it my whole life. I've won a world title. But this, for me, at the time when I got on those mats and start training, I felt like I found a cure because I couldn't think about Afghanistan. It actually calmed me.
Definitely.
But, you could have a medicine, like you said earlier, you could have medicine for something and you could abuse it, like drugs or alcohol. And that's what I did with jiu-jitsu. I just totally abused it and really hid in it for a period of about 3 years. And
to be fair, it's not what you call an effective treatment. It's just a temporizing.
Sublimation.
It's harmful. It's
replacement
therapy.
Yeah.
You're replacing one thing with the other. And that can be temporizing, and that can be good, so you get to the place where you can deal with stuff.
It's a little bit, it's better, right? Because I hear his externalization when he came back of his anxiety, and then the internalization of the anxiety, which the internalization is very, very painful because it's so much agitation turned inward.
So much stuff.
Yeah, it's very difficult to manage.
Woo. That's quite a story, Chad. Yep. And then when did you establish the Mighty Oaks?
Well, after things got much worse, after about a 3-year period of not really dealing with that, and the success of MMA actually made it worse because I had no accountability. I just had people lifting me up, telling me what I wanted to hear, not what I needed to hear. And that led to me and my wife being separated and divorced. And I had been in an affair, and my wife and I had two very different reactions. My wife, really, she was fighting for our family. For me, I found myself in a closet with a pistol in my hand, trying to decide if I wanted to live or die. And I really had made this decision, or came to this conclusion, that I was the problem, and that if I could remove myself from the situation, my family would be sad without me, but they would be better off.
That's a dangerous place for people when people are suicidal, because that's usually the last thought.
That's actually a very strong warning sign that my family would be better off without me. That's a very strong warning sign. So having, being in the closet with a pistol, I see that you somehow came to terms with your situation. What happened?
Was that your bottom right there?
Yeah, I remember having my family pictures on the floor in front of me, and one of these moments. The reason I didn't do it, one, I don't know if I had the courage, but I knew my oldest son that's in Afghanistan, had the only key to my apartment, and so I knew he was going to find me, and that thought was kind of delaying me. My wife knocked on my door, and actually, you'd probably find this interesting because my wife would have never seen that pistol, but I actually hid it under a blanket, like a child would hide something for being maybe shameful. And so I hid that pistol. I went and answered the door, and my wife asked me a pretty radical question that changed my life. And she asked me how I could do everything I did to become a recon Marine, the training, the schools, the attrition rates that overcame, the deployments, the MMA stuff, cutting all this weight and training for these fights, like how I could do all of those things that require discipline. And when it came to my family, that I quit. And that question for me, it just cornered me and led me to make a pretty radical choice, and that was to get back in the fight. And that was followed by the mentorship of this guy named Steve Toth, who stepped in my life, and he challenged me on a very important factor for my recovery, which is the absence of my faith. I had written a plan of how I was going to fix my life and slid it over to him. And we had first met him. This is when I first met him, and he slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. And he tapped on that paper that I wrote, and he said, if this thing doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to let you waste mine. And maybe that's not the case for everyone, but for me, we have a saying at Mighty Oaks Foundation, the work that we do with veterans, if what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? I tried the pills, I tried the counseling, I tried sports and replacement therapy, like you said. None of those things worked, and it was time for me to try something different. And so this guy, Steve, began to mentor me, and the restoration of my faith began. I found restoration of my family. I found hope for the first time, and I found what I think I sought my whole life and needed. I think what we all need in life, and that's purpose. And for me, that purpose was sharing what I discovered with others. For me, it was like if I was dying of cancer and this guy Steve gave me the cure, like I felt obligated to share it with others. And so that's been my purpose ever since. And ultimately it was the birthing of our foundation, the Mighty Oaks Foundation, simply to pay forward.
Was there a community associated with this gentleman's work with you?
Well, my wife was in this church when we separated, and she began to go in there, and she said she would, people tell me the story how she would go in there and pray for me. And I always ask, like, how could you pray for me when I was doing this to you? And she said she would just pray like, God, let me see Chad the way you see Chad. Let me forgive Chad the way you forgive Chad. Let me love Chad the way you love Chad. So this is a strong woman fighting for her family and surrounding herself by the right people. And so Steve was part of this church, and he was an elder. He wasn't an MMA fighter, a military guy. He was a small business owner who just happened to agree to meet with me.
Well, I think it's super interesting that almost all recovery requires the same things that you're exactly talking about, which is the fact that we need community, we need a mentorship,
connected with somebody,
and we need to give what we've been given and help others to recover
and have some kind of faith with something. Yes, faith and purpose.
And so those are all of the components of recovery, and it just is interesting that to recover from pretty much anything, psychologically or physically or emotionally, we need all of those components, and it stands to reason that is what promotes recovery.
I also believe that promotes resiliency as well. The same components that we found help people recover or provide strong resiliency in individuals. And, after founding Mighty Oaks, we've had 2,600 guys come through our recovery program that we have at 4 ranches around the country. That we offer our veterans, active duty, and spouses. But on the resiliency side, I travel around the world to military bases and speak on resiliency, combat resiliency, all these different components, and I've been able to speak to well over 100,000 active duty troops.
Wow!
And just see the results of people that make decisions in the beginning to put these same principles in place in their lives before combat, before traumatic experience, before the hardships of life, and are able to be more resilient. It doesn't mean they won't struggle, but they know how to bounce back when they do.
Speaking of bouncing back, we have a second guest, your attorney, defense attorney, Brian Claypool. It's Claypool Law, Brian? Is that the website?
Claypool Law Firm.
Claypool Lawfirm.com. And Brian was in the middle of the Las Vegas shooting. And you've had PTSD symptoms since, right?
Yeah, I'm still struggling big time, man. I mean,
it's been a year, right?
It's been over a year. I actually was in therapy for about a year after the shooting. Then I took a couple months off toward the holidays, and I regressed and needed help again. And now I found an incredible mass trauma specialist. If you don't mind me mentioning her name, she's
Sure.
fantastic.
Sure.
Anita Avedian.
Mass trauma specialist?
She's a master. Yeah, she's actually counseled in mass trauma.
Wow.
So that's really helped me a lot. But her name's Anita Avedian. And boy, I got to tell you, Drew, it's even the last few weeks.
Good.
It's been hard though. It's been hard for me.
Is it all just you and her together? Is there
It's just me,
feedback, anything like that?
me and her. But I got to tell you, I mean, this is like, I feel like I'm walking around with 20-pound sandbags on my shoulders. That's the best analogy I could give you. Just getting here today, a struggle. Getting, for example, to the grocery store. Came back from a trip to Washington, D.C. My daughter, my little girl you've met, she performed at the Kennedy Center. Came back. It was great. But, man, my refrigerator was empty. Just to get up the energy to go to a grocery store, it's so hard for people to understand.
Is it better since this therapy?
The therapy's been helping me because it's helped me, for example, understand that I'm not in the same place I was before the shooting. So what my therapist is trying to get me to do is to not torment myself because I'm not the way I was before. That's where I'm killing myself. It's like, why am I? Yeah, exactly. Acceptance is a great word. Yeah, why? Instead of like, why am I not as vigilant in court? Why am I not getting to the grocery store? Why am I not wanting to go on a date, for example? Instead of doing that, she's trying to get me to just be aware of where I'm at now, that I don't have a solid foundation now. It's not going to get fixed anytime quick.
So on the line, we've got Chad Robichaux. He's a former recon Marine, and he had a big PTSD syndrome, and now he has a foundation. I'm wondering, Chad, if you have anything to offer or words for Brian.
Yeah. So one of the things that we often find when people come to our program, and people like you, Brian, who have had an incident, or whether it's military, which we deal with, or people that deal with life, I believe the military does not have a monopoly on trauma, by the way. And so someone that might be struggling with some of the things that you're facing is not to have a singular approach. So a lot of people that come to our program will have a clinician that are prescribing medicine. So they'll have a psychologist to have multiple approaches. So, you have it sounds like you have a great clinician that's giving you a therapist who's giving you some good advice and counsel. Plugging into peer groups are important. One of the things that I'll tell you that we do that have found a tremendous amount of success is teaching people how to make decisions in response to their trauma. And what I mean by that is when we have guys come to our program, they will point every hardship of their life and every struggle of their life back to a specific incident. So let's say you're saying I'm not vigilant in court because this happened to me back in the Vegas shooting. And I would argue that the not being vigilant in court has nothing to do with what happened in Vegas shooting, but how you responded to that.
Can I
acceptance of responsibility brings it back into your court to say you do have a choice, you do have control. Now that's easier said than done. Understanding what those choices are and how to control those things is where the mentorship really comes into place.
Yeah, can I ask everybody a question? Because the biggest issue I'm having right now, and it's really beating me down, is anytime I get any kind of ailment, a headache, for example, I'll give you a great example. I had migraine headaches over the last couple of weeks. So I immediately go to a place.
Catastrophize. This is a brain tumor. It's a brain tumor.
Exactly. I drove my neurologist crazy, my general practitioner crazy. Yeah. And if I could share a story with you, and then you guys could respond. About a week ago, I was with my daughter, and I was in tears. I'm like, I don't know. I said, I don't know, honey, if I could do this. She's like, what are you talking about? I said, I think I might have a brain tumor, and I don't have the energy to fight. Okay, I'm emotional about it right now. I just can't fight this. I'm not going to be able to fight it. And then my daughter looked at me and she said, you were able to fight in Vegas to save your life to see me again. Why can't you fight to beat this tumor?
Right.
I mean, if you can, okay, so I don't think I have a tumor.
Right.
But this is it's like, what do you guys think?
Drew, don't you think around the brain injury aspect, like when you have a major trauma,
it's a brain injury.
It's a brain injury.
Yeah, totally.
And
you feel broken.
I think that people are not really informed appropriately about how the brain works and how emotional and traumatic experiences are stored and walled off.
It's actually stored it's walled off in your brain and then stored in your body. And so it's like your body is, for the last year and a half, has still been in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Your body, even though you're going about your day, your cells, your autonomic nervous system is still there. And you know what that makes you? tired of fighting it because you're fighting every day as though it's happening again and again and again. So when you get any other symptomatology, of course,
you're overwhelmed.
The fight's over. I'm losing the fight. I'm going to die.
Yeah, the overwhelming nature of having a brain injury and not being able to handle anything on top of that. Right.
Ask your therapist about neurobiofeedback too, because some of that really helps reprogram.
Yeah, and I'm thinking too, a great idea too is the EMDR, because it was a one singular event.
EMDR works for single events often.
Single events.
You had some childhood trauma too, though, right? With your dad or something?
Yeah, the childhood trauma was just emotional, physical abuse.
Yeah, and so, but you set, and I'll let Chad chat about this. You mentioned this too, Chad, earlier. There are proclivities that set people up to have significant reactions, right?
The body keeps the score.
This is a kind of a question I actually had for you coming on here. Is your perspective on being predispositioned to PTSD? And the reason I ask this is because we have guys that come to our program that have had significant combat trauma. I'm talking like multiple, 5, 6, 7, 8 deployments, having lost dozens of their buddies right in front of them, and then they come to our program, and at midway through our program, we'll ask them to start sharing, their story, and they'll never start in Afghanistan. They always start when I was 7, when I was 8, when I was 9.
Right.
Which leads me to believe there's a predisposition.
Yes, there used to be a lot of literature on that. I remember I used to read it back when we were active in our program.
I feel like there's a predisposition to having a type of mind that wants to go into combat, that feels comfortable with that idea because of trauma.
But Chad, that was your story, right?
Yeah.
In a way. So yes, there's a way.
So I'm going to seek out.
Well, I'm going to solve my problems of trauma through becoming a combat warrior.
And you're also comfortable, because a lot of people who withstand trauma in early childhood think better, are faster, and are better in very, very highly evocative situations. And you function at a high level in these evocative situations, which then makes you prone to actually having more trauma because you're going to be an EMT, you're going to be an attorney, you're going to be a healthcare professional, you're going to be a combat. These types of jobs aren't appealing to just anyone's brain.
So to answer your question, Chad, some of it, of course, it's like everything in a human being. Some of it is genetic, some of it is the environment growing up, and some of it is just the environment you're exposed to. I mean, no matter how, you know better than anybody that there's a certain amount of environmental exposure that no matter how resilient you are, it's going to affect you. So it's all three. And what we find, though, for sure, if you had childhood trauma, it does set you up to have a higher probability of PTSD symptoms. It's almost like it reactivates it.
One of the things that I've seen firsthand is, and I know this from studying now, the limbic system is actually absolutely incredible as it processes trauma to become more efficient to perform, but then it reaches a tipping point.
It shatters. Yeah.
It shatters.
And then you kick into what you got, which was dissociation, which is actually your parasympathetic system shutting everything down. And it's really, it's the limbic system is what is all the information is coming out of the body and feeding into the limbic system, but it's actually the autonomic nervous system in your body that's having the problem.
And the downregulation system becomes ineffective when you're in hyperarousal around the clock, because you're not using the downregulation system, and so it becomes inactive, and then you need medicine to push the downregulation system. Our bodies are designed to do both hyperarousal and then downregulation.
But one or the other, not both simultaneously,
both at the same
which
time.
is what trauma is.
Right.
I have a physiological question. Yeah. Kind of in the moment of combat to ask you guys. I don't know if it's appropriate because it has to do with shooting scenario.
Go ahead.
So I was in a
Brian, are you okay hearing this? You want to,
dude? I've always been fully transparent.
Okay, but but if you want to,
I'm an open book.
No, but hearing
he's going
to tell about a shooting
it's
story.
Fine.
Right.
It's everything. It's fine. Right. It's helpful to me.
Right.
So I was close proximity. A guy in front of me with a rifle. I had a pistol. I'm shooting, and I've studied and learned a lot about the physiological symptoms. So everything slows down. I'm watching the casings eject out of my weapon. I didn't have any ear protection on like I do now. And my partner, I didn't even know he was there, but subconsciously, I guess I knew it was him. He was shooting over my shoulder. I never heard a explosion from my gun. I never heard an explosion from his gun. I heard these loud, like kind of like just snaps. Mm-hmm. And my ears never had ringing or anything. So I know that would be audio exclusion. However, about 20 feet in front of me, I could totally make out people talking, understand exactly every word they said. How could my audio shut down the banging, but still hear people talking?
You have two muscles in your ear. This is something that Stephen Porges writes about, that is used usually to attune us to vocal prosody. So when you're sitting with your therapist and she's going, I understand, using her voice to kind of lyrically connect with you, our ear literally zooms into it. Babies, have this mechanism. I've never heard, I'm surmising, Chad, that has something to do with that these two muscles probably adjust in some way as to keep your eardrum from moving, but somehow also, allow this, hyperacuity in one area. And of course, the brain is a big part of it too, of course.
Can I throw up another question for all of you to think about too, in terms of what I physically felt at the shooting? I think this is therapeutic for me after hearing Chad's story. So when I was in the middle of the shooting and the shots were going down, it was so rapid, boom, 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 boom. And I was expecting to die, during that first round. I just never thought I would survive. The bullets felt so close. And then there was a little bit of a break, right? And I remember my body gasping, like I couldn't even breathe. I couldn't breathe. I thought saliva was going to just spew out of my mouth. Like I was what am I doing? And I remember saying to myself, and I'm wondering if that's still, if this is always going to be with me. I said to myself, part of my soul is dead. Like I said, even if I live, I feel like part of my inner soul is decimated and destroyed. And here I am a year and a half later, and I am really struggling with the energy. This you knew me well, Drew, before the shooting. Always outgoing, always active, always out doing things, meeting people left and right. Now I still feel physically like part of my inner body is missing. Is that a figment of my imagination?
No,
or there's something physical.
It's an injury. Yeah,
it's definitely an injury.
Yeah.
And especially, I think, because when you get so traumatized, especially in one incident like that, your whole connection between your brain and all the way down your central nervous system, all the way down your spine, there's an interruption. And that interruption sounds like what you were receiving, the information around your soul being like you're decimated. And then I think in your limbic system too, your level of trust, your ability to trust.
Right. So
Thank you.
That has got to be completely decimated.
Right.
Thank you.
So not only there's you before the trauma and you after the trauma, right? And you sort of recognize that right in the moment. But I think what really died more than a part of you. A part of you was injured, but your sense of the world and your safe sense of yourself in the world is what really died.
That's really the aspect that is painful.
I want to thank you for mentioning trust. Yeah. Because I had trust issues before the shooting. Drew, we talked once before about it. With I didn't have a family foundation. Mom died when I was little. Dad was alcoholic. The emotional abuse. One time he pulled a gun out and pointed at me when he was drunk, and I thought he was going to shoot me in the head.
Oh God!
Anyway, that's before. Now after, so here I am with a single parent, got a little girl, still aspiring. Hey, one day maybe I'll get married, right? Maybe I'll have like a real family. And here I am, the clock's ticking, and now I feel like I'm even worse off. Like now I can't even. I try to go on a date. I have trouble looking. Maybe you guys can call. I have trouble looking at the woman in her eyes. My head is shifting. Even my therapist is telling me, you can't, your head is moving, dude. Like, can't you focus? I have trouble. My point is, I now have trouble even trusting that I will ever experience marriage and a family. I'm even worse off than I was before. I can't trust.
This is the same thought as I'm going to die. This is the same.
Oh, it's the same thing?
Same stuff. All catastrophizing.
Yeah, it's just catastrophizing.
And so I can tell you, if you do work in therapy, and Chad, I'll let you ring in on this too, you will regain ability to connect.
I think you'll be better.
I would agree.
I think you'll be better.
You will be. I can, if you really do the work, which takes a long time. I can almost guarantee you, Shelly is right.
You'll be better. These types.
Why do you think I would be better?
Because your original injury had, as you said, I've always had trust issue. Your dad with the gun already made closeness an unsafe place.
Okay.
Therapy can make it safe again.
Yeah, you are going to, when you overcome and you reach your resiliency, you're going to be more well-rounded in all of the areas of life, and you're going to be able to connect with people.
But you got to stay with it.
You have to work towards
you got to
doing
stay
that.
with the work.
And I think the therapist now that you're going to begin to trust, the therapist is going to mimic a whole relationship for you.
Yes.
That you're going to be able to learn to interface with these folks, and then when you go on a date, you're going to learn how to connect.
You'll have a
to
template.
people.
You'll have a model for that connection. Chad, do you agree?
I agree, and I could speak not only from helping other people, but from personal experience myself, because I struggled with a lot of things before this happened, just from childhood and from life. And this situation that almost crushed and destroyed me, ultimately now I feel like it's made me stronger. I learned how to manage historical issues in my past. I learned how to respond to things differently. When I talked about making choices, like now just because I'm in a better spot now doesn't mean I don't think about bad things that happened in Afghanistan in my childhood and losing friends and those type of things. I still think about those things, and they still bring emotion and hurt and pain and even anxiety at times, but I respond to them differently. And because of having experienced that, I've learned how to respond to hardships differently. And I think ultimately it's made me a more healthy person, a better husband, a better father. And ultimately it's really just brought me to a different place, and I'm pretty thankful to be in now.
And that's what's very, very good about recovery in general.
Yeah, it's why
right?
these are opportunities to. That's what we're interested in. That's why we don't like replacement therapies and stuff like that. We're interested in people flourishing, getting better than they ever knew they could be, and that's what these opportunities are if you stick with it. But before I go to break, Chad, I want to go back to that auditory thing you had. It's also possible that was just a perceptual distortion in the middle of a very or a distorted memory, even in a highly traumatizing situation. Okay, I'll be right back. Let's talk about CBD. It's, of course, everywhere today. It's a hot topic, and I get asked about it all the time. Bottom line, although there are way more claims, there is very little clinical evidence just yet. The science is lagging behind, but many people are using it and reporting anecdotally very good results. I want to first define exactly what we're talking about here. CBD, or cannabidiol, is an extract from hemp. And while you might associate it with marijuana, CBD is the non-high, non-rewarding component of hemp. And it's responsible for other effects, calming, sleep, not high. Now, about the products. There are a ton of them out there today. Forget the vast array of reported health benefits. It's important to be aware of what you're buying. I was recently introduced to a company called Select CBD, an Oregon-based company that focuses on high-quality ingredients and manufacturing standards, no hype. Their CBD-based products are available in a wide range of formulations and flavors, each of which is clearly described to you so you can make an informed decision without promises that seem too good to be true. Like I said, the reported benefits of CBD are compelling, and I'm excited to see how things develop with the science as this booming industry gets going. So if you want to try CBD, you might check out Select CBD. To learn more, go to drdrew.com/select. That is my site, drdrew.com/SELECT. For a limited time, you can save 25% at checkout with the code DRDREW. And we are back. We have another guest with us today. It's John Anderson. He was on a previous This Life podcast. John, and his wife, Myra, of course, we've got Brian and Chad still here. But John and his wife, Myra, and two girlfriends were part of the Las Vegas, Nevada mass shooting as well. And last we were talking to you, Myra was struggling a little bit, right? John?
Yeah, she was struggling. Yeah, she was struggling a little bit because she wasn't used to this. She's never been around it. And so I would say that it was, somewhat traumatic to her, but, I think she's done extremely well, made a great recovery. And we were just talking about this last night. And she's doing phenomenally well. She's doing really well.
And John, you were in the military and seem to not have been affected by this so much.
I really wasn't. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years. I was in an infantry company. I was a machine gunner. I went to Lebanon in 1983 as part of the multinational peacekeeping force. I was there when they had the Beruit bombing on October 23rd. And I was involved in combat. And, quite frankly, it really hasn't affected me. Why me? I don't know. But I mean, I have some of my own ideas, but it really didn't. And so then when the Route 91 event happened, it really didn't have an effect on me.
And so, Chad, isn't this interesting? This is what we were talking about earlier, right? The predisposing risk factors John and Myra must not have had, or whatever resiliency factors genetically, or whatever lack of trauma in their childhood, or whatever faith, whatever it is, they had it enough to deal with it. Would you agree, Chad?
I would agree. And one of the things that I do want to speak on, not harp on, but speak on at least, is that, I believe, there's lots of factors for predispositions and particularly for resiliency. And I believe faith's one of them, listening to your other guests here from the Vegas shooting. And I forget the name of the one that's still struggling.
No, she's not. Brian here.
Brian. And, he even spoke about it. I believe, the wound is not just a physical wound. It's not just a mental wound. It's a soul wound. And if people believe, in faith or they're created or not, we were never created to see or experience things like that. So it is a deep soul wound. And I think the restoration of faith is a big factor in healing, but definitely a big factor in resiliency.
Well, and John and Myra, that was part of you have a very strong faith-based view of the world, right? Yes?
Yeah, we're both committed Christians, but I think one of the things that really helps both Myra and myself is that we do not look backwards. So let me just give you an example, is that there are times where I'll be, looking on YouTube and I'll see, because I'm, the Marine Corps was so important to me, I'll look at military videos or I'll look at stuff from Iraq and Afghanistan. And after a period of time, I started looking at this stuff going, you know what? This is not healthy for me to watch this. I used to watch some of the gun camera footage from the Apache helicopters as they were basically shooting terrorists. And at first, you kind of get this self-righteous stance that we're doing the right thing and all of that. But then I started to think, this is a loss of human life. This is, I'm not in the military anymore, so I don't need to be proud of my heritage and my background, but sit here and there and continue to look at something that I know is not healthy for me. So as I, continue in life, I take that stance with a lot of things. There's music that I won't listen to. There's certain things I won't partake in because I realize that it isn't healthy for me. So I just kind of steer my life in the direction for the things that are healthy for me. And ironically, the things that come across my way, the things that, that you have to deal with every day, it seems like I have a lot less stress in dealing with those things. It's like now I'm able to cope with them better. It doesn't matter what it is, whether it's sitting in traffic and not having the patience or, dealing with, financial issues with my business, no matter what it is. The more that I strive to keep the things in my life that are not healthy for me away from me, the better I do.
Well, I think that one of the things that I'm hearing you say that is important is that you've decided what is good for your true self. And that does heal people, because what is good for them and okay for them gives them a level of ownership over what they're going to allow in their lives and what they're not going to participate in. And that does bring down, a level of anxiety, because you're no longer exposing yourself to the injuries or the things that were bothering you in the past. So that does sound like you have much more availability for your true self and what is really truly works for you. I
would argue, though, that the looking back it's good for a healthy person, but if you've been injured with PTSD, your body's in it all the time. It doesn't have to look back. It's always in it.
Exactly. Yep. Correct.
So that's what makes it tough. And the reality is, this is a new field, treating PTSD. It really is.
Especially all the different types of traumas, because every type of trauma needs its own portion of specialty, and then we need evidence-based practices where we can then guarantee that if we do this, it's going to actually help this person.
Mm-hmm. Chad, any comment? Oh, wait, hold on. The producer has something.
I love what John's saying. And I also agree with what you said, Dr. Drew. I mean, John's basically put himself in a position where he's decided in advance how he's going to respond to certain things in his life based on the behaviors and choices he makes every day. That works. I believe in that. That's a big part of our methodology of how we help people at Mighty Oaks. I also agree with you, Dr. Drew, that when you're in the midst of just – you just feel like you're drowning. It's not easy to do that. And that's where the right community being around you to help you through that.
Isn't it interesting, though, Chad? Isn't it interesting that in a weird way, even though John doesn't really have a big dose of PTSD, he was doing this in a weird kind of way, the same thing you were doing with MMA, right?
Yes.
Sort of massaging this stuff. And we have a tendency to do that as humans. We re-traumatize ourselves. It's crazy. We have a compulsion to do it.
I mean, isn't PTSD must be fascinating because, and I mean that in a good way, because you hear John's experience, and I'm happy that he and his wife are getting through it. But then you hear me, and I'm in here today.
What you didn't hear Chad's? Chad's pretty intense too.
But I to be fully transparent with you, when I hear John's story, I do start feeling a bit inadequate again.
I would imagine you'd feel.
What's wrong with me?
You'd feel you'd feel angry.
They're moving through it, and here I am.
Well,
you'd feel angry and broken.
Angry
and broken is what you feel.
He may not have had the
he did.
One of the things that I would like to add is that, if you were to look at me 20 years ago, I'm not the same person that I am now.
Okay.
I mean, I was a completely different person. I mean,
that was 20 years.
More easy to fly off the handle, more easy, to get angry, to get upset.
I don't think a year and a half.
So it's a process. It's a
long process.
that I have to take. Yep, it's a long process, and the best thing that I think I ever really learned, through my Christian faith is that I literally, some days I can take a day at a time, and sometimes I have to take it a moment at a moment. Now, as I've gotten more mature and as I've walked through this, it's not so much the moment by moment. Now it's like, okay, I'll just take it a day by day, and, we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But there were days in my life that I literally had to take things moment by moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hey, Brian, I would say this. That word disorder, and I got two doctors on the line here. So look, I don't like that word disorder because the most common thing that people refer PTSD as the body's normal response to an abnormal situation.
Yeah.
What's your body seen and went through, and what you seen and went through is not a normal situation. It's an abnormal situation, and your body's responding normally to that exactly the way it was created, designed to respond. And that's not a disorder at all. Your body's doing that in order to protect you from ever experiencing something like that again. And so the fact that you feel broken or disordered or in a state that you'll never recover from is just not true. If you make the right steps and surround yourself with the right people, you will react.
And there are evolutionary theories. There are evolutionary theories that people get PTSD to be a canary in the coal mine for the rest of us, to keep everybody safe. So there's got to be some adaptive advantage to this, and that's what one of the theories is.
Yeah, look, I mean, for me, the good news is I have been able to build better boundaries, for example. I think one of your guests had mentioned about being around things that are more healthy for you. So I've eliminated some of the negative in my world. I've learned that in therapy. That's helped me, number one. Number two, I've still been a good parent, so I'm validating myself. I've been there for my daughter. So I've been able to do that.
Yeah.
Number three, just to give a disclaimer out there for everybody in case they wanted to hire me, I'm still a good trial lawyer. I'm still really good. I know I said I wasn't vigilant. Oh, please, God, help me.
No, I know
I'm
you're good.
still good.
I know that about you.
Let me clarify that.
Well,
What I meant by that is like when I go into court,
you don't have the vitality you used to have.
Yeah.
You don't feel the vitality.
Exactly.
The judge wouldn't know.
That's a great thank you for helping me clarify that. Because people say that, I'll say, "Why? I don't feel like I'm as good as I was." They're like, "Are you crazy?" So it's in my mind. I feel like maybe I'm not. But then what I meant by that is the effect.
Yeah.
The effect of my vocation. Like I'll go into court, I'll come home, and I'll lay down like a little baby and sleep.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like I never did that before.
I know.
But the good news is I have been able to maintain my career and work on cases that make an impact. So that's helping me move through the trauma.
Yeah.
The biggest hole I've got right now is really my personal world, which we've already talked about. That's where I'm just really
going to get a lot
struggling.
Better. The one thing, and Chad, I'll have you follow on with this because I'm sure you face this kind of thing, is when you have these injuries, the recovery is an opportunity to be better than you ever knew you could be. But you have to be open to, I don't really know who I'm going to be on the other side of this. Whoever it is, whatever I need to be is what I will be. Chad, you want to get to that? Because you thought of yourself probably very differently when you started your recovery process.
Yeah, well, I mean, it talks about that hole that Brian talked about. I had a big, giant hole inside of me that was tied to identity and purpose. And so my identity and purpose was tied to my job. That was taken away from me. And because of this, what I went through. And so I had a very tough time. The MMA thing for me was something I did my whole life, but the surgence in it was like, to me, just to put myself in it at such a high level was to try to fill that void of shame and really just to, on the surface, repair what I had lost. And so it was really, for me, at the end, realizing that didn't work, was coming to understanding of finding purpose and finding something that made me want to get up and live every day again. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very important, even if you're in a job that you love. And it sounds like, Brian, you're in a job that you love. Being able to find the things that'll make you want to wake up every morning and feel purposeful and live again, and have something to work forward towards.
And I know relationships are sort of your key, your flashpoint. And I think that same philosophy applies to your interpersonal experiences too. You got to find people that be around people that are good for you, that light you up, that fuel you. And they may not be the people you're used to being around. That's what I'm saying. You got to be open to.
Yeah, the recovery process is a little bit. You have to withstand a little bit more intensity in people helping you, and to be able to tolerate that if you're not used to having a lot of therapeutic relationships in your life. Sometimes it's a little bit daunting to be around people who are so in tuned and so are available for you.
But let me throw something out here though. Okay. We live, in my opinion, we live in one of the worst cities in the planet.
Agreed.
To be going through PTSD.
Agreed.
Let me give you a great example. Give you a great example.
Walk down the homeless encampment. That's traumatic for me.
It's not only that. It's the disconnect that I feel living in.
You're
this
in your
big
car
city.
all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
it's not a very strong community.
Exactly.
Based.
I'm in therapy the other day. Actually, 2 days ago, Anita looks at me and says, she was kind of saying what you're saying, Drew. Hey, Brian, you to get your social life going again, maybe you join meetup.com or join a hiking club or something. And so I'm like, yeah. There's not going to be any hot girls in the hiking club. Yeah. All right. So then she says to me, then she asked me the $1 million question. Tell me a guy friend that you could really lean on.
There you go.
Okay. And you know what I did?
Told her there was
silence.
Yeah.
You just got it.
Yeah.
3 seconds of silence. I'm sitting there racking my brain. Not that you're not a friend, Drew, but I just you're a friend. But
I get
it. Look, I mean, that was an eye opener.
Yeah.
Who am I really? Who are my? Where's my base of solid friends out here? I'm just being real with you.
No, that's a
I
really.
do
it's
not.
Very hard out here.
But here's the deal. That's the kind of thing. That's one little tiny thing. This is the kind of stuff that we're saying is going to make you better than you ever knew you could be. Because now you're going to be attending to stuff
and now
like
you're
that.
questioning that.
And you're going to try to find some quality relationships.
Okay,
you're going to be paying attention to this now. And this is something you didn't even know you didn't have, right? And now you need it, and you don't have it, and you're going to have to cultivate it.
That's a good point.
Chad?
Yeah. I mean, this is a very important thing, because so in our program at Mighty Oaks, we bring guys, and we have this intensive, this 6-day intensive that they first go through. And it's for PTSD, for guys who have struggled with trauma. And you would think the classes would be loaded with, what PTSD is and what it's not. And we spend 1 hour on PTSD. And what we spend the rest of our time on is daily choices in living. So we cover topics like margin. How do you manage your time? And someone might think, well, what's managing your time have to do with PTSD? Well, if you already have stress, anxiety, and you're trying to fit 26 hours in a 24-hour day, it's not going to go well. Another topic that we have is brotherhood. And that's understanding how to have relationships with people in your life, like the ones you seem that Brian is lacking. Because we really understand that most people in their life most people's lives are filled with just surface level relationships.
Exactly.
And they don't have anyone to go to in those dark times. Mm-hmm. It's such a big factor in the recovery process.
Especially if you don't trust people.
John, you want to talk to that? Well, that's sort of where that's what motivates the void a little bit. John, you want to address this at all? He's still there?
Go ahead and say what you just said again. I need to hear it again one more time.
The importance of relationships, and if you're a male, other males that you can really count on.
Oh, I can. I'll tell you what. This is something that is right near and dear to my heart, and it's actually something that I recently learned about myself. But for the majority of my life, I've been kind of like a lone wolf, because I've just kind of gone and done my own thing. And I thought to myself that I was just typically a lone wolf, but what it was is that I just really wasn't an extroverted person. And the relationships that I was seeking out was not in large numbers. Like, for example, my wife, she loves a full house. She loves all kinds of people being over and things like that. But I'm more a one-on-one guy. And what I can tell you is that about 15 years ago, I developed a relationship with a strong Christian man that just basically presented himself to me. And he said he really felt led to mentor me. And I can tell you that one-on-one relationship that I had with him and the accountability that I had with him was paramount in me growing and becoming a better man. And even actually, getting over some of my, what I would label as emotional immaturity, and even some of my anger and things like that. And by moving forward with that relationship, it really helped me, but it didn't really change me from being an extroverted person or an introverted person.
Right, that's your
because I'm still that way.
Right.
I still seek out one-on-one or one-on-two relationships, and I've realized that that's just my personality.
Right, right. And but this is something, Brian, that Shelly and I know well, and you're hearing over and over and over the same thing, is that we affect each other. Brains change other brains.
Central
positively.
Oh, yeah.
Positively and negatively, but also very positively. And so that time spent with other attuned others, in whatever context works for you, that's where your brain regrows stuff. Literally, that injury heals. Literally.
I totally agree with that. I was, just to be a little bit transparent, probably about 12 or 13 years ago, I was in a men's group for men that were abusive to their wives. And I never really thought I was abusive, but I was recommended to go to this group. And I met with the pastor of my church, who had met with me for 3 years and listened to me complain about, things going on in my marriage. He met my ex-wife one time, and he said, "John, I really, really think you need to go to this class."
This is not her. It's one visit. It's not her. It's you, John.
Yes. And he said to me, "I really think you need to go." And I said, "Well, I don't think I need to go, but I trust you, so I'm going to go." After going there for 8 weeks, finally the light bulb just clicked on one day, and I realized that there were some elements, not by and large, but there were some elements of me that were emotionally abusive.
Yeah.
And, so one thing that I learned in this class, Dr. Drew, was that one of the things that you were talking about is this couple had been involved in a seminar with some doctor in Denver, Colorado. And he was saying that your neural pathways can reform.
Yeah.
And that when you start healing and they start changing, it takes anywhere from about 2.5 to 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I stuck with this class for 2 years, and at the 2.5-year mark, my life started to change drastically.
Yeah,
but I had to do all the hard work beforehand and keep putting the positive things in my life. But the other thing that I want to say when you're talking about people that are, people that can be good for you, I can tell you that my wife, Myra, my wife now, she is so good for my personality. Yeah. I mean, it's phenomenal how good she is for me, for who I am.
Well, and be fair, you've done a lot of work to kind of make
to receive that.
To make that connection deep. And so,
yep, correct.
Yeah. So you're talking about literally rewiring the brain, and that is a slow process.
Yep.
Brain heals slow, but it does heal.
But that, Drew, that to dovetail that, about the brain, regenerating. So Anita, my therapist, asked me a great question the other day, just like what we're talking about, because she felt like I was pretty down, disconnected. I don't really have a lot. I sound like a loser today, but she's like, you don't really have any friends.
Oh, no judging yourself. No judging yourself.
I feel like a big L on my forehead today.
No, we don't feel that way. All right, interestingly, you feel that way.
Well, I feel I don't feel real connected here, but she did help me feel a little bit better with this question. She said, "Where do you go where you do feel a little bit more connected?" Mm-hmm. Great question, right? Mm-hmm. So she's probing. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it. And, Drew, I spend, quite a bit of time in Austin, Texas. I've got, a couple investments there and got a downtown condo there. I love being around water, lakes, ocean, mountains. So that was a great question. So it got me out of my box a little bit. Okay, maybe I need to spend a little bit more time when I go to Austin. When I get off that plane in Austin, for some reason, I do feel a little bit more at ease. I've got a couple good buddies there.
Oh, there you
go.
Genuine.
That's the
right.
reason.
So I am trying to write on paper, like where can I go to feel that a bit more of a connection, and then I need to cultivate that. I need to overtly take action and do that. So I thought that was productive, right?
You're doing it right now. You're doing all the things that you need to do.
So you sensed I didn't want to come here today, right?
Is that what you're saying? Okay. You're doing it right now. You're showing up.
That's why I was late.
You're showing up.
Yeah, showing up is half the battle.
That is half the battle. You never know what information you're going to get when you show up somewhere.
No, exactly.
And we don't know what we don't know. So if we are encouraged by someone we trust to go into a support group or go into a therapy group, I did group therapy for a year on intimacy issues because I don't trust
as a patient.
As a patient,
I was in therapy for 11 years.
That was a long time ago. But I did that year commitment of a group where we talked about our lack of trust. Coming from trauma.
Are you in
PTSD.
therapy now?
I am not currently
in
therapy. I've been in therapy for 12 years.
Yeah.
So this doesn't come just overnight. I don't know what I don't know, and I can't learn what I don't know in isolation.
It's a lot of it is experiential too. It's not intellectual. It's not about talking.
No, it's very.
It's hard to even put it into words. So just prepare for that. It's about doing these things. And
what do you mean it's experiential? You
well,
mean
like John
going
said,
and doing something.
Like John said, the light, sort of his perspective changed all of a sudden. Like all of a sudden he's in a different place. All of a sudden he's a different person. How did that happen? That was not intellect. He didn't decide. Not a thinking thing. That was just he was all of a sudden looking at himself from himself being in a different place, in a different state. John, would that be?
What it was for me was this: is that every week I would go to this class, and I committed to going to this class for 1 year, and you were only allowed to miss 2 sessions, and that was it. So you had to be very committed to it. So I committed to it. So at the 8th mark, I was listening to what they normally talk about, and there's different subjects on emotional abuse and stuff. That night, because I was separated from my current wife, I was actually living in my travel trailer in Wisconsin, 20 and 30 below at night, and I was taking care of my elderly parents. I was sitting there on the couch watching some TV, and I was watching my father talk to my mother. And I listened to the tone he used, the mannerisms he used, and all of a sudden it just went on. That's exactly what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's defined as emotional abuse.
You
and now I've got to change
that.
that.
You experienced it differently. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, listen, it's been a very interesting conversation. Let's sort of wrap things up here. Chad, any last thoughts?
No. I just one last encouragement for Brian is as you make steps forward, you see something that pops up again. Don't let it set you back. I mean, right now, my son's in Afghanistan. I've been there 8 times. I've buried friends from there. Not an easy place. So I find myself lately having anxiety, nightmares that I never had before. But the way I respond to them differently, knowing who I am, how to move forward, it's really changed the way I handle this and my wife and I. So
thank you, Chad.
Thank you for your story, Chad.
And your
thank you for your
service. And the organization, which is Mighty Oaks Foundation. You go to mightyoaksprograms.org. I beg your pardon, mightyoaksprograms.org. John, thank you as well. Any last words?
Yeah, just Brian, that if you're struggling, one of the things that I used to do is that every time I had a negative thought or a negative feeling, I would replace it with 3 good positive thoughts or 3 good positive feelings. If I had to take a moment to literally force that negative thought out of my head, I would. But I would replace it with 3 good things.
Yeah, thank you, Chad and John. And my final comment is more of a question, if we could answer quickly. How do you guys and everybody deal with the agony of me feeling like people don't understand me?
Oh, that's a good one for Chad. Chad, go ahead. Chad deals with that all the time.
I feel frustrated.
Chad, I'm sure you deal with that
Nobody
all the time.
gets me.
Yeah. I mean, this was almost the demise of my marriage. My wife doesn't understand me. She's never seen what I've seen. She's never been what I've been through. I sat across from a clinical counselor, and I immediately disqualify him because he's never been where I've been. He doesn't understand where I've been. They don't have to understand. I'm glad my wife's never been to Afghanistan and can understand where I've been. I'm so thankful that the majority of the world wasn't at Las Vegas shooting and experienced that. And for you to understand that that's, something you've endured and not people aren't going to understand what you've been through. But even though they don't understand what you've been through, people still can offer guidance, comfort, friendship, and support to you, despite the fact that they don't understand.
It's why we put people in groups with other trauma survivors or find a similar kind of trauma, because it's more efficient connection. You'll feel more trusting. You'll feel more understood. It's we're trying to get you to connect, and that's one way, one road in. It's not the whole story, but if it's something you want to do, you should talk to that therapist about it.
And is there any foundations that have been developed for that particular incident? And has anyone gone forward to do any type of community-based based groups.
Yeah, there are what's called survivor groups in many different cities.
From the Vegas thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There are a lot of different cities.
You should go visit that.
Yeah.
You should visit.
I think that's maybe a piece.
Right, but doesn't fix the problem of when I have to explain to somebody why I don't want to go out on a Friday night, why I don't feel like being around you.
You don't owe anybody any explanations.
You don't owe them an explanation, not at all, not one bit. And I would agree with what Chad had to say. I am glad that my wife does not understand what I saw when I was in Lebanon. I mean, it was horrific, and she doesn't need to. But here's one thing that I learned about that, is that if I keep reaching out, expecting people or wanting people to understand me or understand where I'm coming from, the only thing it did was isolate me.
Yeah. So
as a defense mechanism, I hear that kind of comes up as a defensive.
Keeps you untrusting.
It does keep you untrusting.
Keeps you locked.
It continues to push that agenda.
It's all right. It's a normal part of this whole syndrome.
It's very
all right, gentlemen. John, Chad, thank you so much, guys. We appreciate it. And Brian, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Hey, don't send me a bill for this session.
No, but bottom line is, and I know everybody feels this. I am so sorry you were suffering. I'm sorry you're suffering, but I'm in a strange way almost thrilled that there could be some real stuff on the other side of it.
Drew and I don't like to
there will be. There will be. You're already in the process.
Yeah, you're already in the process by coming here today and talking out loud about where you're at.
Well, if I ever get married, you four are invited.
All right, we're going. Party.
All right.
All right,
guys. Thank you.
Thank
you, Shelly. Great job as the host today. What's that?
Happy
Memorial Day.
Happy Memorial Day, everybody, and we will see you next time. All right, that's about it for this episode of This Life. Thanks for listening and subscribing on your favorite platforms. Rate us 5 stars and tell a friend. Also, be sure to visit drdrew.com for the latest news. We'll tell you where you can find all of our health-related content, including the latest in-depth series, The History of Opium. You can now listen to it on the Weekly Infusion podcast. We have some great and very interesting and appropriate interviews with key historical players in the history of opium. We're excited about our newest podcast, Dr. Drew After Dark, which has been described as a dark web reboot of Loveline. It's the hottest guest spot for all the most popular comedians. Beware, it is for a mature audience. It is kind of a reboot of Loveline. You can hear the episodes first in a podcast form Thursday. Then on Friday, you can watch all the video episodes when the YouTube page drops on the Your Mom's House YouTube channel. New episodes every week. Subscribe, tell a friend. Also on Doctor.com, you can find Swole Patrol, our health and fitness podcast with Mike Catherwood. If you want something a bit more refined that will expand your intellectual horizons, please subscribe to the Dr. Drew podcast, where I feature a wide variety of very interesting and important guests. Get in-depth interviews there. Last but not least, me and Adam and Dr. Drew Show podcast. It's a lot of fun, and we are still together, and you can get it 5 days a week. So go to drdrew.com, please tell a friend, and we thank you for it. And thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.